Hi, I'm Beth Velasquez, Associate State Director for Communications for AARP New Mexico, and joining me today is Deval Westphal. Deval worked for the Albuquerque Journal for over 34 years, serving as editorial page editor for 6 years, before leaving recently to join the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, where she now serves as Executive Vice President of Policy and Programs. Thank you, Deval, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Beth.
We're going to have a great discussion about how best to utilize editorial boards. So I think we'll just get right into it. And so one of the first questions I have for you, Deval, is when an organization sits down with the editorial board, what key components are you looking for?
Well, I think in the past, you've done a really good job of coming in prepared. And if I had any advice to anybody, it would be come in very prepared. Know what you want to talk about and know what your ask is. And by ask, not just that you want an editorial or to place a guest column or letters to the editor, but that you want what positive action do you want? And AARP has been very good when it's come to the journal saying, we are pushing this piece of legislation and why and who it's going to affect. And I think that's really the best sales pitch, as it were, that you can do. It's going to affect this many New Mexicans or whatever state you're in. It's going to affect this many people in this strata. And this is why it's important. And so if you can come in prepared with those kind of specifics, it's a home run. And also handouts help. I know we're in a Zoom era and an electronic era, but if you're coming in person, if you can bring a packet that kind of you can leave those with the people who are going to be going back and reviewing and writing, that's just so helpful. And if you're doing it digitally, then make them available digitally as well.
So what in the past has the board's process for selecting an editorial been?
Well, a lot has to do, you're up against what's going on in the whole world, in the whole state, in the whole city every day. And so it changes. And so you're really kind of looking for that sweet spot where your issue is going to really uh, make a difference. Timing really matters. If you're going into a legislative session or a city council meeting, or the federal government is going to make a decision on a policy, on an act, try and hit that a couple of weeks beforehand. And let them know that this is coming. It's going to be a big deal in your world. And wouldn't you want to weigh in as well as a newspaper? And we're not going to weigh in after the fact. And if it's nothing's really going to happen and there's no real lever to pull by writing something, maybe that falls by the wayside as well. So kind of finding that, what, this is important. Action is going to be taken. If you weigh in now, you can move it maybe one way or the other. That's going to resonate with an editorial board.
Okay. One of the things that we've really had some success with is coming in and presenting to the editorial board. And then I've noticed that once we kind of do that, we put it on your radar, then it seems like the newsroom is paying more attention to that issue as it goes through the process. So how does the editorial board, or does the editorial board, influence coverage by the newsroom?
Well, I don't know if we influence it in kind of the true sense of that word, but you're exactly right. It's all about getting it on radar. About making, there's a whole lot going on. People are kind of running out of bandwidth. How do you keep track of changes that are proposed or happening or that should be proposed and happen? So when we would run our editorial boards, unless it was an endorsement, we would invite reporters as well. If we're going to have experts come in and talk about something, we want as many eyes and ears in the room as possible. Because as you point out, there's a bunch of different ways to get a bite at the apple. You can get a story, you can get a letter, you can get a guest column, and kind of the cherry on top is an editorial, which is the voice of the newspaper weighing in. So I think it's very symbiotic. Also, if we would write an editorial, often then readers would sound off. Maybe there would be action at the city council, the county commission, the state legislature. Our delegation in Washington might weigh in. Now that's a story. So now the reporters are going to follow it. And so you kind of get that back and forth, keeping it on the front burner and in people's, front of mind until something, happens with it.
Are there certain things you look for in an op-ed or a letter to the editor, and are those things different from an editorial?
Sure. So an editorial, of course, is the voice of the paper,
Correct.
and so that's the voice of ownership and management and the board. But what we're looking for, and often something would come in as a letter to the editor and spark a story, or a guest column and spark a story, and then we would kind of delve into it a little bit deeper and opine on an editorial. But we're looking for timeliness. We're looking for how many people it's going to affect. And that doesn't just sometimes it's not just a squeaky wheel. Somebody raises an issue and you're like, boy, this will affect a lot of fill in the blank: seniors, low income individuals, people struggling with addiction. The list goes on. And so you try to see, is that going to affect a lot of people? Is it kind of outrageous? There sometimes legislation just, they don't think of unintended consequences. And so if we can point out that, and that this is just going to have terrible collateral damage, we would weigh in too. But we're always kind of looking for those tips. We can't be everywhere. And so when readers and when advocacy organizations have something and bring it to mind, if they can say it's going to affect a lot of people, it's going to be really good, it's going to be really bad. And especially too, if you have an answer, if you have a solution, what, this is a problem and this is how you fix it, whether it's through a piece of legislation or advocacy work. Often people can gripe, right, and grouse and complain. But when you say, no, here is a fix, here is a way to move the needle, really interested in that as well.
Well, thank you, Deval. I really appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with us, and hopefully these are some tips that we can take back and apply to our everyday work. So I thank you very much for your time.
You bet. I hope so. It's all about getting really good information out to the readership, and there is a lot of good information out there that newspaper people just aren't aware of. So do, use those avenues and get it out there so that people are more aware.
All right. Thank you so much.
You bet.